if you want to go ahead, I don't think the congressman is on yet. Justine, have you seen his phone number pop up yet?
Nope.
So let's give it one more minute, Terrence, before we start. And Kyra is on, so if we have to start with Kyra and then go to the congressman, we can do that. But we'll give him just another minute to pop on.
That work? So, Dean, why don't we go ahead and start, and if Congressman Duncan jumps in here, we'll take him in after Kyra.
That sounds good.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Terence Roberts, and hope everybody's doing well. I'm the current chair at TATT and also the mayor of the city of Anderson. And you know, this is a series of Thursday afternoon forums that Dean and I talked about several weeks ago, and part of it was to keep us all connected as an organization, as an upstate. And secondly, the thing that has been most interesting is just seeing what's going on in other parts of the upstate and seeing how we're handling life due to COVID-19. We have a certain format, but today we have a couple of speakers, and I'll go into our first one. Kyra Lobbins is with Clemson University. I just met her probably right at the downturn when we went into our COVID situation. She's a new member at TATT. I'm excited to hear what she has to say in regards to what's going on at Clemson University, as far as Clemson being the largest college in the upstate community. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kyra. Kyra?
Yes, thank you so much, Terrence. Great to see everybody here this afternoon. Quick thank you to Dean and Sharon for reaching out and providing me this opportunity to give you all an update on Clemson University. As we all know, we're experiencing something we've never seen in our lifetime and learning how to navigate the unfamiliar territory as we go. However, I want you to know that Clemson University is in a good place. We'll get through this, we'll come out okay. We went into this pandemic ahead of the curve, and the plan is to come out ahead of the curve. We made the decision very early to bring our students back from studying abroad, starting with the majority of our abroad students being in Italy and in Spain. Our president and others had been tracking the virus since January and knew that it was only going to get worse and it was moving at a very rapid pace. So we made a decision that was in the best interest of our students and their families. Initially, we did receive a lot of pushback from parents and others who were upset about us disrupting the students' experience, but we knew it was the right thing to do. We received a few nasty emails, but then once everything happened the way that it did, we were then thanked and applauded for acting so quickly and making the decision to bring the students back. Luckily, we've been preparing a business continuity plan for the past 4 years in case a major issue such as COVID-19 did happen to disrupt campus operations. We've practiced an e-learning day. We've implemented frequent assessments to make rapid corrections. And most importantly, we've been preparing our resilient faculty who have been the real MVPs in this situation. In addition to our faculty, we really do have some of the best decision makers in the country, both on our executive leadership team and our emergency operations committee, which we refer to as EOC. Members of both have been working around the clock. People have really stepped up and we're incredibly grateful. Our emergency operations committee has been meeting every single day, every single work day for the past 2 months. And that leads me into the areas that Dean asked me to update you all on specifically today. And the first being the end of the semester and summer programs. So where are we in those areas? So the final third of the semester was moved completely online due to COVID-19. April 24th was the final day of our spring semester classes, and we ended the 5th week of online instruction. Our faculty have been outstanding and have gone above and beyond to accommodate students during this transition. You know, many of our students come from various backgrounds, so they're in rural areas, different time zones, limited access to Wi-Fi, et cetera. And our faculty and staff noticed the students who are not as connected as others during this online process. And so our faculty reached out to some of those students, you know, one-on-one to get them back engaged. They sent out laptops, hotspots to rural areas, whatever they needed to get the students back engaged. So that really speaks to the commitment and the dedication that our faculty have to our students and their success at Clemson. All of our instruction for summer 2020 has been moved online. So our summer study abroad programs have been canceled. New student orientation will be conducted virtually with hopes to implement an in-person component before August classes begin. Summer camps are canceled, and that includes our athletic camps. But this is all in line with keeping the risk down and being laser focused on our fall opening, which is the goal. Circumstances will not allow us to celebrate accomplishments of the class of 2020 in the traditional manner. However, President Clements is committed to recognizing the accomplishments of the class of 2020 in a manner consistent with Clemson's history and tradition. We're hoping to have an on-campus graduation either later this summer or hopefully in the fall when it's safe to return to campus. But here's some good news. We have refunded approximately $15 million in student fees for housing, dining, and other student services, which we all know is extremely needed in this time as folks are losing jobs and running short on income from one day to the next. The next area that Dean asked me to talk about is our role in supporting the Oconee tornadoes. What was that, about 2 weeks ago, those tornadoes rode through Seneca and it was just devastating, completely uprooted the area. And we quickly pivoted and immediately looked into ways to help our facilities crew clean the tree damage on campus. And the Clemson University Fire Department did great work responding to emergency calls around the city, while also supporting regional search and rescue efforts. For more than 60 university employees volunteered during the week of the 20th at a comprehensive community support operation that was established in Seneca. And even today, we still have people who are volunteering to help with the cleanup in the Seneca area. The next area Dean asked me to focus on is to update you all on the Clemson faculty supporting the COVID-19 research. Our research laboratories and facilities are ramped down, non-essential research activities on and off campus. So right now, the most important thing is the health and safety of our faculty, staff, students, visitors, and the community. We've adjusted research operations, and the university has done this in three ways. The first is making our highest priority the health of everyone that I just mentioned. The second will be to work to preserve essential research functions and activity to the extent possible. And the third is we will use alternative research functioning that aligns with compliance obligations to our sponsors and university policies. The university curated a list of essential research operations that require facility access and identify personnel who are able and available to perform those essential tasks. Several of our faculty are working with MUSC in Charleston and Prisma to help come up with various ways for improved testing for COVID-19. For us, it really is about safety and making sure that we create a safe environment for when we do open in the fall, fingers crossed, which is our goal. And that leads into what is our strategy for the 2020 school year. The university is taking strong steps in support of our students and their families as it pertains to the fall. That includes a phased opening approach from now until then, because we want to limit the amount of exposure until we do open in the fall. Just last week, our Associate Vice President for Public Safety told our Board of Trustees we have a laser focus on returning to campus as scheduled. However, the learning model for the fall will be determined by the data and science related to the pandemic. The leadership team in our Emergency Operations Center personnel are crafting recommendations for the university's reemergence post-pandemic on a daily basis. The Board of Trustees unanimously accepted university leadership's recommendation to freeze tuition and mandatory academic fees for both in-state and out-of-state undergraduate students for the next year. Decisions on housing and dining fees will be made in the near future. The board also approved a preliminary budget for fiscal year 2020 and 21, which begins July 1st, that caps our spending at current levels. We have held operating budgets the same for next fiscal year, but that is subject to change. And we also have a hiring freeze in place through the end of the fiscal year, along with expenditure reduction in numerous areas. Furloughs are also being looked at, but we are hoping that we don't have to go there. The hotel and the conference center, the Martin and the Madron Center, I think most of y'all are familiar with that. They are remaining closed. However, the golf course is opening tomorrow, as well as the botanical garden and the experimental forest. But they're opening under strict social distancing guidelines. We have no idea what the fall would look like as it pertains to athletic events. I know many of you are wondering what will the football season look like, but many options are on the table, and they're being tossed around, and a few of those being moving the football season to January, only having regional play, playing with no fans, playing only 8 games. You know, it's still a question mark, a big question mark. Many unknowns and decisions to still be made, and hopefully within the next 30 days, we will have a little bit more clarity. But all in all, we're optimistic. We will emerge from this and come out very strong, reinvented and repositioned for the future, but we will reemerge nonetheless. So that was a quick little, high level update on where the university is. I knew I went through that pretty quickly, but I want to leave a couple minutes for questions. So feel free to fire away if there are any.
Thank you, Kyra. I'll let, and that was a lot of good information, especially the golf course being open. That's what my primary focus will be. Thank you for doing that. Dean, can you facilitate any questions for us?
Sure. If anyone has anything, you're welcome to put it in on the chat. I think, Kyra, I think that was really good information, and a lot of obviously. Like everyone else, still a lot of things really are going to be fluid as folks are, as we're all figuring out the issues and things. From a timeline as it relates to the fall semester, you said you anticipate kind of a tiered opening approach. Is that with at least at this point the spring or the fall semester starting on whatever date it's currently scheduled and you're kind of working back, or is that something that could be pushed and things even condensed from a traditional fall semester, spring semester kind of standpoint? Have those conversations happened yet?
Yeah, Dean, that's a great question. And honestly, all options are on the table right now. The phased-in approach that I was referencing just a moment ago is mainly pertaining to the faculty and staff getting back on campus. So having us in place weeks at a time, first wave goes in potentially around June 1st and another wave and so on and so forth. And then by the fall, the plan is to have, classes in person and everything running up and normal, but that will look different. I mean, we're looking at spacing classes out where there could be potentially more night classes on the weekend, smaller classes. We're looking at ways to decrease interaction, even in, housing and dining. And that's a huge issue. When you're in a dorm, it's hard to limit interaction with other students who are living in such close quarters. So looking at ways to make the facility safe for the students. There are no clear answers as of now. Again, our EOC is working around the clock, but everything that you mentioned plus more is on the table for us to observe. And as we get closer to the time, given the information that we have as it pertains to the virus and where it is and how people are being affected and at what level, will determine how we can return and in what shape.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, of course, I would assume all colleges and universities are in a similar boat. And in terms of that approach, obviously y'all are focusing on Clemson, but I would also assume there's been conversations with some of the other local colleges and things of that nature. Very quickly, can you talk about that a little bit in terms of what that looks like from the college to college standpoint?
Yes, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the first part of that question? I was reading the question that just popped up from Jeff
right.
about the ACC and TV network. So I'm sorry.
Which is obviously critical But everybody wants to know about football. But communication with other colleges, both within state and in other areas. How is that looking?
Yeah. So our president is actually meeting with on a daily basis, meeting with other presidents in the ACC. He's also communicating weekly with APLU. So everyone is brought up to speed on what other universities are doing. He's leading a lot of the efforts here in the state itself. So he's constantly meeting with other leaders across not only the state, but the country. He's very connected on committees, a representative of higher education nationwide. And so he is a very sound voice in the decisions that are coming down that we're reading about on a grand scale. So there are different committees and measures in place to keep them all on the same page. So one university or college doesn't get too far ahead of the other ones without, folks being on the same page and others being left behind, because that's paramount right now. You don't want to necessarily stomp on another college, or university that's not as financially stable. You want to try to do as much as you can to keep everybody level.
Right. Great. And then real quick, if you could answer Jeff's question as best as you can around the role that TV networks might play in any decisions around the football season.
So whatever happens from an athletic standpoint will be consistent within the conference. And it could, the NCAA, whatever they decide on will obviously impact all the institutions. But as far as the ACC and TV networks are concerned, it's all going to be consistent with the decision moving forward with what does the football season look like. And we don't know what that looks like right now. So everything will be aligned. It's just, we don't know exactly what that alignment will be.
Great. And then the last question, Liz Seaman asks about how Clemson is deploying CARES funds.
CARES Fund Act support students. Yes, I actually have something about that written down here. CARES funds. Let me get back to you on that, Liz, because I want to give you accurate information. I don't want to keep you all holding here while I'm looking through my notes, because that question, I remember addressing something like that yesterday. I just don't remember exactly where I wrote it down.
Okay, well, perfect. Well, Kyra, thank you so much. And Terence, I saw very briefly Congressman Duncan. I believe he is on, and I'm going to unmute him from Jordan's if you want to give a brief introduction, and then hopefully we will have the congressman on if he wants to unmute and participate.
Gotcha. I did see Jeff for just a second, but hopefully he's there somewhere virtually and he'll come on. I saw Jordan's box too, but it's an honor to have Congressman Duncan speak to us today. Obviously, he probably needs no introduction to this group. Jeff has represented our 3rd district well here since I believe 2011, I think. And the thing about Jeff is that I think more than anything, he believes in the upstate. He grew up in Greenville. He went to Clemson. He represents our particular area. And Jeff has a big heart. I don't know if he remembers this, but 3 years ago, I had a serious episode health-wise, and Jeff Duncan was probably, as I got back on my feet months later, he came in my office and didn't ask me anything politically or personally. He just wanted to make sure I was okay. So that's the type of person that Congressman Duncan is. And so, Jeff, it's a great honor to have you in front of us. I'll turn it over.
Well, thank you guys for having me on, Terence. And we'll go ahead and just tell you, we've approached this whole COVID-19 effort in my office really similarly to how the president set up the coronavirus task force and delegated responsibilities out across the 16 employees that serve the 3rd Congressional District. And so if you think about 3rd District residents South Carolinians that were trapped overseas in travel and couldn't get back to the United States. We dedicated someone to work with the State Department on that. If you think about how we work with both the state government, the federal government, and coordinating efforts, whether that's unemployment insurance efforts or federal funds flowing to the state, we've had somebody dedicated to that. Whether it's dealing with PPP and SBA, we've dedicated a team member to that. So my coronavirus task force, which is really Team Duncan, has stepped up to the plate and done a tremendous job in working with our constituents, people from all over the state. And really because of my connections, we've had calls from all over the country seeking assistance and guidance on how to navigate FEMA and how to offer services or products to the federal government and the federal government's response to this. And so my team has really stepped up. I applaud their efforts on this, and especially within the PPP lending grant aspects of it, working with banks, both Joshua Gross and Jordan Sharon, Christian and Joshua and Rick Atkins. Working with banks. Let me just give you an update. I never thought I would go to Washington and vote for $2 trillion in extra spending, but I do believe that the government with its mandates has caused a lot of the pain on Main Street and with a lot of the issues that our businesses are experiencing. And so based on that culpability, Washington, I felt like needed to help lessen the pain by getting some resources down to Main Street so that we could have a rapid restart to our economy. And so I supported the efforts, both the CARES Act, once it finally got to the Monday after the midnight vote on Friday night, and then with the triple P tranche that we just voted on last week, trying to get the money down to Main Street America. And so working with Rick primarily working with our local banks and their efforts, and really working with the SBA in a lot of ways, we were able to do that. Let me just give you some information that staff provided me today. When looking solely at the second tranche of triple P funding, more than 587,000 loans totaling over $43 billion have been approved for lenders with less than $10 billion in assets. That's our smaller banks. Lenders with between 10 and 50 billion in assets, medium-sized banks, have been approved for more than 206,000 loans at a total of over $20 billion, while lenders with greater than 50 billion in assets have been approved for 167,000 loans totaling over $25 billion. That's a lot of money that has gotten down to Main Street America. Now, there were some glitches in the system. If you think about the triple P program, government set this up in 7 to 10 days. For our federal government, as burdensome and cumbersome and bureaucratic as it is, to do something this monumental in 7 to 10 days was pretty phenomenal. And so we did run into some glitches where the portal froze, and especially in this second tranche when you had the robotic efforts of banks really trying to get those applications in to seize a part of that money for their customers early. Yeah, it caused the portal to freeze up. And so what SBA did is it went back to more a manual input. And once that happened, small banks were able to really navigate a little better, and more money was able to flow late Monday. And according to Rick, that after the SBA made those changes, it allows smaller businesses access. SBA also closed a portal for larger banks, larger than $1 billion in assets, for about 7 hours yesterday. So that gave the small guys, Main Street businesses, a big advantage for one of the first times that we've seen where small banks and small businesses were able to access SBA funding even ahead of a lot of the big banks. And I think that's important for our Main Street businesses. We have, in my office, we have really made a lot of calls over the last, Susan, I would say 4 weeks or so, to both constituents, small business owners, leaders within the community, chambers of commerce. We did a big chamber call, using conference calls. We've done Zooms as well. Just trying to reach out and talk to those folks that are affected in the 3rd District of South Carolina on how they're affected, what resources they're getting, what they may not be getting, how my office might be able to help a little bit more, what they're hearing. We had about an hour and a half call, hour and 33 minutes today with a group of business leaders. I see Wes Holsey's on here, and Wes had to drop off the call, which I fully understood because after an hour and a half of being on a conference call, having done so many conference calls, yeah, you benefit from the questions asked, the conversations with other people, but we are also busy people. And I know Wes had other things to do. A couple other people had to drop off during that hour and a half. I hope the questions were answered. We had a great conversation about unemployment insurance, about employees being able to access that extra $600 and what that may or may not mean for businesses being able to get those employees to come back. If there is an intent to rehire, if a bona fide letter of rehiring or return to work has been issued, then and that employee chooses to stay at home, I believe they will not have access to that extra $600 that Congress appropriated with unemployment insurance. If the employer files that with DEW, then that employee needs to come back to work if they want to maintain their livelihood. If they don't, and the employer has filed that, then that $600 benefit goes away, and that employee is just on normal unemployment insurance, which is a lot less than what they would make if they were working. So that's a good thing to get the employees to get back to work so we can have a rapid restart. I would be happy to answer any questions if we can. I've got staff on the call as well. We'll try to answer those. If I can't answer those, just because of the broad nature of the multifaceted approach to COVID-19, I will have one of my staff members on our coronavirus COVID-19 Wuhan flu task force answer those questions for you. If not on the Zoom, then we'll get back with you. So I'll be glad, Terrence, to open that up to a few questions real quick.
Thank you, Jim. I think Dean is manning the whiteboard. And do you have any questions, Dean?
Yes, I do, Congressman. The first question was, do you think there will be real consideration for expanding the program year 2020 WYOA funding to states? The initial funding was recently released to states, and South Carolina saw a significant reduction in adult, youth, and dislocated worker funding.
Yeah, so I'm gonna have to ask one of my staff members to get back with you on that. I know in the last effort in the PPP program, there was a lot of talk about getting money down to the states. I believe we're going to continue to see that effort. The problem that's going to affect more funding coming to the states is this huge push for states to be bailed out by the federal government for all of their debt, not COVID related, but all their debt. South Carolina has really been fiscally responsible from state government standpoint on how we spend money and how we give money to colleges and roads and bridges and all the things that the state does. But other states have really lived like there was no tomorrow. They've spent money, I think, irresponsibly and run up a bunch of debt. And now they're asking the federal government to bail them out. That's not COVID related. So there's going to be a big push in Washington. If you think about California and Texas and New York and New Jersey, they have large delegations. There's going to be a big push within those delegations to grab some sort of bailout for the states. I'm not for bailouts for the states unless it's COVID related. If it's COVID related, the federal government and state governments really caused a lot of this, brought a lot of this pain on themselves. And maybe there is going to be some federal money that comes down to the states for that. But I'm going to fight real hard because I believe South Carolina will end up subsidizing other states with our tax dollars when we have lived as a state very fiscally responsible. And other states have not.
Great.
I hope that answered some of your question there.
Well, and as you probably would expect, two of your staff members said send that question directly to them. So I will. So Doug, your question will get answered. The other part of it, specifics directly by a couple of the staff members. Another question we had, Congressman, is, as you said, it was important. And is important to have this initial response due to the crisis and things going on. But the reality is at some point, we're going to have to pay for all of this. Have you had any conversations or been part of conversations now about approaches towards, additional taxes or paying down the road for the costs that are being created now?
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest concerns, especially for fiscal conservatives like myself. It's just the amount of debt we're adding to the national debt, where I think we're approaching about $26 trillion now, and somebody's going to have to pay for it. I don't see us raising taxes to pay for it, although there will be an effort to see tax increases. That's going to be another wet blanket thrown on the economy once we do get restarted. So I'm not going to be for tax increases. What I'd love to do is just cut spending, really address, and I believe we have an opportunity here to address all the mandatory spending programs at Washington. 2/3 of federal spending is all on mandatory. If you think about all of federal spending, 1/3 we deal with on an annual basis and annual appropriations process. 2/3 of government spending is what's called mandatory spending, and it's on autopilot. And we never delve into the mandatory spending programs. I think we're going to have to if we're going to approach this, the amount of debt we have as a nation. And then do we look at tariffs? Do we look at some sort of punitive measures toward China if it's proven that this was released from a Wuhan lab and they tried to cover it up and they misled the globe and allowed this thing to spread? Do they have some culpability? There's a lot of talk about different avenues there. Nobody has come up with a solution. We're not in Washington now, so everything's done by conference calls, but there is concern out there about the level of debt we're adding. And if there's another tranche here, if we go back for another bite of the apple for money down to the states and the counties and municipalities, then that's more borrowing that we're going to have to do as a nation, and that's going to add to the debt, and that's concerning to so many people.
Great. A couple final questions. One is, and I know you have talked about this, I was, as you mentioned, the call last week with the Chambers of Commerce. The big question there was about 501c6 organizations being included in future funding efforts. Is there any update on that at this point?
So we've reached out to a Ways and Means Committee about how those organizations, just because of their IRS tax classification, were not available or not able to participate in the PPP funding. So hopefully, if there is another effort, whether it's a funding bill or whether it's just a cleanup bill, that it will allow some of those other IRS classifications to have access to maybe a third tranche of money or going forward. I don't think we're going to change the classification. We talked a little bit about that last week with the chambers of changing how they're classified. I don't think we need to do that. I think we just need to add to future legislation that those IRS classifications of nonprofits, such as the chambers, do have access to that funding just like any other business.
Okay, great. Congressman, another question, kind of back to the question around the funding, specifics around Social Security and Medicare. Do you advocate for a reduction in those programs as part of that 2/3 spending you were talked about, or do you feel like those are programs that need to stay at the general place they are now, and there are other programs that can be impacted to reduce some of the spending moving forward?
I think it's other programs. We're not talking about Medicare and Social Security, but I do think that changes need to be made about something Paul Ryan had talked about in 2011 about future beneficiaries, about maybe delaying access to Social Security benefits or Medicare benefits for 6 months, a year. Right now, you access those at a certain age. But for people that are under 50 years old that still have 12 or 15 years before they access that, maybe they have to wait until they're 62 and 6 months or 63 years old before that access. What that does is that changes the glide slope for solvency for Medicare and Medicaid. I think that's one of the plans that are on the table. It wouldn't benefit any Social Security Medicare recipients now, but if you're 50 years or younger, then maybe you have to wait just a little bit longer. And maybe it's a phased in 50 to 40 and 40 to 30 and 30 to 20 for future beneficiaries, just to make sure that our grandchildren have the same social safety net of Medicare and Social Security that we enjoy. I'm 55, so it wouldn't affect me. But if I was under 50 and my children, maybe they have to work a little longer or not work, but just wait a little longer before they can reach in and access those benefits that government provides. And so that's just one of the plans that's talked about. But there are a lot of other things. We can look at SNAP and WIC and the housing, and there's a lot of other in the social safety net programs, mandatory spending of benefits that I think we are going to have to look at as a nation as we have $26 trillion in debt. What are we going to do? And I think every option, every topic is on the table, but Congress is going to be smart about this. We're not going to make it so dramatic that it impacts a certain demographic or a certain segment of the population. As you mentioned, Medicare and Social Security would target senior adults. We're not going to do that. We're going to be smart, and it's going to be phased in. Anything we do would be phased in. It's not going to be black and white, and it would take time to change. If you think about it as an airplane landing, you think about a glide slope, trying to glide into some sort of balanced budget or some sort of more positive spending arrangement so that we can start paying back or addressing the amount of debt we have as a nation. Just like any business would do. You're not going to be dramatic and shock your business, but you're going to try to figure out at what point in the future, is that 2 years, is that 5 years, is that 20 years, am I going to hit a point of solvency? And I think that's how we're going to approach it.
Great. Well, obviously that's a conversation that we could have for quite a long time. And, but we thank you for your thoughtfulness and your leadership. Kyra wanted to make sure that everyone knows that you are a Clemson grad and former football player, and she wanted to thank you for all of your support of the university and all that you do for the Upstate. And we appreciate you taking the time to be with us. You and your staff have been great supporters of TATT and the Upstate holistically. And obviously, this is a crisis that none of us could have predicted or expected. It's a public health crisis that is also leading into an economic crisis. So you have to deal, obviously, with both ends of that. And we appreciate all that you're doing on behalf of the Upstate of South Carolina to make sure that as this unfolds, that all of our communities are taken care of. So thank you again for being with us and for all you do for the Upstate.
Well, thanks, Dean. One final comment that I'll say is that I know the impact that college football and college athletics have on not just towns like Clemson, but the whole Upstate. You think about impacts on restaurants and hospitality and retail and everything. Hopefully, and I'm advocating to keep the college football season open on time, filling our stadiums up. But we're going to be smart. We're going to use common sense. We're going to do this as a nation. I want to applaud the governor of McMaster and what they've done. If you think about lining up a bunch of dominoes that you push over and they all fall down, if you take one of those dominoes out in that line, it stops the fall of the rest of them. I think that's what we've done with pausing in the economy, social distancing, stay-at-home orders. We've stopped those dominoes from falling. And so now we're taking this time to pause and figure out, how do we go from here? How do we do it wisely so that we don't impact people that are more vulnerable than others for this COVID? Understanding that we're probably all going to be exposed to COVID-19. Some of us will get it. Some of us will have worse symptoms than others. Some will never know we've had it. And it will be fatal for a segment of the population just based on the trend. But we've got to get to a point where we don't act out of fear and that we use common sense. That's personal common sense, that's family common sense, and that's common sense across the economy and government. So I think we're going to do that. We're going to be debating this response for 100 years. As policymaker, we've got to take the information we're given and do what's best for not only the economy, but our constituents. And I think that's what's happening right now. So I applaud everybody. Nobody's perfect. We made mistakes, but we're going to get through this as a nation because we are a strong nation. We have the ability to get through this. We're going to do that. We're going to do that together. Everybody on this call, we're all in this together. So I applaud you guys for doing this. Thanks for having me on. And with that, I will yield back and say, God bless. Go Tigers.
Great. Thank you very much. With that, Aaron, if you don't mind, we are going to push back from your element for right now, and hopefully we'll have a minute there at the end, but I want to make sure we get into our county updates. And the first one is from Maricel Loza, who is the director of the United Way for Greenwood and Abbeville counties. And Maricel, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Good afternoon, everybody. Wanted to give you a quick update on what's happening over here in Greenwood County and Greenwood and Abbeville. We are doing lots of work out in the community. We are part of a group coalition that has been meeting called the Greenwood Emergency Response Committee, working with our emergency management folks. Great team to work with, really dynamic, focused on what's happening in our community and trying to help connect the dots for our constituents and residents of our communities. Greenwood, United Way of Greenwood and Abbeville counties does have a COVID web page where we are posting on a daily basis and updating on a daily basis the information pertinent to, again, both Greenwood and Abbeville and other pertinent communities that's around us. We also have made sure that we have updated our 211, trying to make it as robust as possible with the latest information and encouraging all our community partners and residents to access 211 for information via the 211 COVID navigators that have been specifically trained to provide COVID updates and information. One of our initial responses as the United Way, when we first heard about the COVID restrictions and our lockdown, was that we wanted to put our arms around on what the community was needing and not make assumptions. And so we sent out a community survey. We sent it out through our industries to employees. We sent it out through our community partners for the folks that they serve, and took a very long, hard look at the responses. And I've been trying to provide services to meet the needs of folks as we started interpreting the results of those surveys. One of the items that rose to the top and that has been on a national level termed as the second wave, the first one of course being the COVID virus itself, but the second wave being mental health. And when we looked at our assessment from the community, the levels of stress, the levels of anxiety, and the levels of voiced need from the community in terms of mental health issues and where to go and what to do was pretty high up there on the data results. In addition to that, obviously maintaining well-being, mental health well-being during a crisis like this is essential. We were fortunate to have been able to negotiate a pilot project with an organization called Credible Mind, which is an organization that has developed a mental health platform to provide well-being information under standard, usual pre-COVID circumstances. And when the crisis hit, they worked with us to develop a Greenwood platform that was launched 2 weeks earlier. Our original launch was going to be in May for Mental Health Month, but we moved it up 2 weeks so that we would be able to provide this for our community. I encourage all of you to take a look at it. It holds a world of information. You can find it at greenwood.crediblemindcom, or you can go to our website, which is unitedwaygac.org, and just click on mental health. Again, the focus being not just mental health issues, but also how to maintain mental health well-being during this time of crisis. We have upped our social media platforms, trying to make sure that we send out information on a daily basis, updated information on a daily basis, really showcasing what our partners are doing, what are some of their constraints, also looking at sharing things like wish lists and needs that folks have in the community. We've been working very closely also in light of the volunteer needs that we have in our community. We started a volunteer platform, which can also be found on our website. That volunteer platform allows us to register folks that want to volunteer, whether that be in person with very safe standards in place, or whether they would like to volunteer virtually. We're looking at connecting children to folks that can read to them. We're looking to connect elders to folks that will call them on a daily basis just to say, hello, we care, we're here for you. So that platform will help connect those dots. And we're also looking at utilizing that platform for organizations that have needs. Again, looking at the wish list opportunity to be able to collect items that different organizations need. And then last but certainly not least are our funding opportunities. We are working with one of our local foundations as well as our emergency response team to look at local funding and being able to pool dollars on a local level. We've also working with the 1SC committees throughout the state and the United Way State Association, of which I sit on the board, and I'm involved with the Accelerate SC Task Force, looking at opportunities to be able to provide some community-wide plans for the governor and his team to review for potential state funding. So lots going on behind the scenes. Our offices are technically closed, our physical offices, but we are all working remotely and are available pretty much at this point 24/7. And that's pretty much it from Greenwood.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Maricel. And Sharon will make sure and include those links in the recap from this meeting. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Teri Gilstrap with the Anderson County Economic Development Office to talk a little bit about what's going on there in Anderson. And Teri, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Dean, for this opportunity. From the Anderson County perspective, we're continuing our 7-day-a-week contact with the municipalities in order to ensure that they have resources and that those countywide services and needs are met. The Emergency Preparedness Division continues to work with DHEC and our industry's reaction, impact, and trying to allow them to be proactive when necessary to address their status, which changes daily. And many of our industries are continuing to operate and are trying to remain as productive as possible. Our Sheriff's Department has reported that there's a decrease in crime in the past 7 weeks of approximately 8%. Domestic incidents seem to be the most volatile, but there is an overall decrease in crime. Now, in the economic development area, or our division, our new projects that were in discussion before the pandemic have continued, which we were very thankful for. And we've surveyed our existing industry and continually reach out personally with follow-up phone calls to see those who have not responded or those who may have specific needs they've asked us to help them on. We're publishing the weekly impact results, and we'll send you our most recent flyer on that. And Anderson County does have industries that are continuing to hire employees and are continuing as usual. Yesterday I spoke, or day before yesterday, I spoke with Arthrex, who has hit their goal of 250 for this time period. So we're excited about that. They're well on their way to meet their commitment to our county. The county seems to be following the national impact of the areas hardest hit, being retail and service industry. The manufacturing industry impacts seem to be situational, from automotive to directly affected illnesses in certain locations seem to impact those. We have not seen the impact from high-risk occupations outside of medical, retail, or the service industry. And the impact of lack of childcare seems to be adapted to well by our local essential industries. Now, our goal to see the non-essential impact and to try to kind of survey that and see, we don't feel like we've seen the true impact of how that's going to affect the childcare situation with the non-essential industries. And our goal is to gauge resiliency of our local industries and through conversations that are ongoing. And we hope that our feedback so far for our area of demand for the county labor pool continues to be very positive. So as bad as times are, we really are shocked at the resiliency of some. So I thank you for the opportunity to do this. Any specific questions I can answer at this time.
Great. Well, we'll move on, but if there's anyone wants to reach out to Teri directly, you are welcome to do that. And Teri, thank you. I think that's an important point, that certain areas and industries are hit more than others, and so there are folks who are hiring. We had Ann Engemeyer on a couple weeks ago, and she talked about that as well. So I think while lots of people have lost jobs, and we hope many of them will go back to that same job, if you're in a situation where that job is not going to come back, there are other options. So sharing that with folks, I think, is going to be real critical, because there are some industries that will continue to be hiring.
Yes.
Great. All right, next I'm going to turn over to Sara Montero with the Hispanic Alliance in Greenville to give a Greenville update. Sara, thank you so much for being with us.
No, thank you for the opportunity to share. So I'll just reference it, in order to be brief, I'll reference a post that Sharon has helped us with, where you can find a lot more of the information I'll cover today, and links to 2 of the a needs assessment that we launched in 2019, as well as the results from a survey that we've been doing with our partners on the needs of the Hispanic community. Our office closed back in March 16th, so we've been working remotely. We are housed at Greenville Technical College, so we follow their schedule. Since then, we've been very busy on 2 fronts, which is kind of the marketing communications front, making sure materials are translated. At the very beginning, a lot of that was health centered, and also working with Greenville County Schools to get information to Hispanic parents. And, you know, a lot of confusion when it came to the technology requirements and all those things. Those first 2 weeks, we were very busy trying to get information out there in Spanish. And now a lot of the needs have switched over to more financial needs, questions about financial things that run the gamut from business loans to the incentive that some people are receiving, and also the need for food. So that's something that in the last 2 weeks, we've seen a great need for food. I think from the needs assessment that I referenced, we learned that the industries that affect more the Hispanic community are construction and also the hospitality industry, both when it comes to restaurants and also just cleaning services. And so those folks have been very much affected by this crisis. The construction people, manufacturing, not as much, but there are people who are doing a lot of the cleaning and restaurant support have been severely affected. And I think that's where we're seeing some of the need from the food banks. So we've been partnering with churches, United Way, Pasos, which is another nonprofit here in Greenville, to try to meet that demand. I want to also acknowledge, I'm going to put this on the chat, our website, HispanicAllianceSC.com. We have resources there for people who serve the Hispanic community. Some of the resources are in Spanish, but the information that describe the resources are in English. So if you go to that website, you will be able to navigate to an English page where you can download Spanish resources, English resources. We do our best at trying to translate the information that's coming out of the state and out of our county, and then just multiple resources in different areas that you can see on there. You can also see a link for the survey if maybe your agency or your business serves the Hispanic community. We'd love to learn what you're hearing from them. And then again, on that beautiful article that Sharon helped us with, you can see a link to the results so far. We launched that survey kind of at the end of March. I think those are the main updates that I had for you. Again, that article that we worked on with Sharon has a lot more information that you can read at your leisure. Thank you for this time.
Great, wonderful. Thank you, Sara. That's perfect. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sharon, who's going to give quick updates from some of the other counties.
Hi. Okay, so I've got just a couple. Hannah Jarrett from the United Way of the Piedmont, which services Spartanburg, Union, and Cherokee, said that she is encouraged by the fact that they have applied for and received funding for food and shelter from the 1SC fund that Marisol mentioned. This funding will be distributed to nonprofit partners, providing food and shelter in Spartanburg, Cherokee, and Union. The United Way of the Piedmont is convening regular calls with the nonprofit community, encouraged by the collaboration, coordination, and creativity. The challenges are food pantries struggling to keep stock. The organizations are not able to make bulk purchases to stock their shelves, so that's a challenge. There's also concern about the moratorium of evictions being lifted tomorrow, and they anticipate an influx in the need and requests related to that. John Kamey from Lawrence County, he's the Lawrence County Administrator. He said he's encouraged by a lot of things. Lawrence is going to propel forward coming out of this, he says. There's growth in the northern part, growth along the interstate, new spec building outside of Gray Court. He says the biggest challenge is the unknown. His #1 concern economically is figuring out how to open up. He's concerned about the effects on small businesses. And then finally, Dave Eldridge for Oconee County. He's encouraged by the fact that Borg Warner is doing so well, making such progress to get repaired and reopened. And then also that his clients realize this is a new world and have to have better emergency plans. The challenging thing that he sees is the number of small firms and maybe even nonprofits that won't survive this. That is what I have from the other counties.
Great, thank you, Sharon. And again, all of this will be on the summary that we send out as a wrap up. And next week we'll hear from a couple more counties. As you can tell, we're trying to differentiate the types of stakeholders that we include each week and the counties so we can get a broad depth of what's happening across the upstate. So I skipped her before, but we have a minute. I'm going to turn it over to Aaron Oots, who is coordinating the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and they've been having great calls every week. And Aaron, if you want to give a quick update.
Okay, Dean, thank you very much. The Upstate Entrepreneur Ecosystem has been very busy, and many of you are part of that, whether you know it or not. If you're working with a business to help it get on its feet, figure out where to go forward, you are part of that ecosystem. But we just finished our 5th webinar on Tuesday, and it was all about mental health for businesses and business owners. Beth Freeman, who is an industrial occupational psychologist at Upstate, USC Upstate, did a fabulous job. And the slides from that are on the TATT at the Top webpage on the Economic and Entrepreneurial Vitality section, kind of in the bottom right of that webpage. Very good resource there. Our upcoming webinar on the 5th is going to be with Scott Bayer, who is the chair of the Department of Economics over at Clemson, and he's going to kind of give us a state of the economy plus kind of what leading and lagging indicators are there that might give us some kind of start to fill in some of our knowledge gaps, because as many of us have said today, we really don't know. And then on the 12th, we'll have our last webinar where it'll be kind of a roundup of all the folks who are working with entrepreneurs, talking about what they're learning, what they want going forward to lead us to our quarterly workshop on June 25th. So that's it in a very quick nutshell.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate that. And again, the call next Tuesday, while primarily for folks who work with entrepreneurs and small businesses, is certainly open to anyone who is interested to hear. As we said, we have economist Scott Bayer from Clemson, so it should be good. I have a couple quick comments and announcements. First, and I know Jessica Miserandino is on the call. Probably to no surprise to everyone, we are pushing back the pushed back date for the Peak Young Leaders Summit. It was originally scheduled for March. We moved it to June, and we now have decided that we're going to move it back. It's going to be September 14th, which is also a Monday. Same location, same keynote speaker as originally planned. We'll be sending out that information in the next day or so. So look for that, and hopefully, we hope that will be long enough time that we can still again have a great Young Leaders event like we've done for, this will be the 5th year of that event. A couple other quick things. The regional summit scheduled for September 23rd. We're also having conversations as to whether that will make sense to do this year or whether we will need to push that back to next spring. Hope to have an answer on that probably by mid-June, but just so you know, we are having that discussion as well. Then lastly, I mentioned last week, we are planning a county listening tour for the counties across the upstate. We're working on dates in late May for those, and anyone who wants to be on any of those calls are welcome. So as soon as we have dates for those, we will send them to you. If you're in one of the counties and one of our contacts has been for other things, expect to hear from Sharon if you have not already. So with that, I will turn it back over to Terence, and you can wrap us up.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you, everybody. Great information from the speakers. Quick updates from all over the upstate. And thank you for joining. We'll be here next Thursday. Again, keep the faith, and we will come out of this on the other side, and hopefully everything will be back to our new normal as soon as possible. Everybody have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.